Thank all of you for attending this webinar. It's my pleasure to be here with you. We have a very fine platform using the Cisco WebEx. I have a lot of features before me, and I'm going to do my best to push the right button so we don't all get disconnected. I do have the ability to see the attendee list, and I've already spotted a number of familiar faces and friends, so I'm really pleased that you could all make it. But most importantly, there is a Q&A panel, and so please feel free at any time to submit a question. If I can answer the question in the context of the current slide, I'll do it right away. If I can't, we'll just queue those up, and Jessica will help me get those toward the end of the presentation. So let's get started. Why PMO managers are at high risk. That's an interesting topic, and it's one that I'd like to spend just a few moments on because it helps us establish a couple of key PMO manager skill sets that will really help just about any PMO manager with the job of getting the PMO manager job and then keeping the job as PMO manager. And then I would like to pass on some executive feedback regarding the kinds of PMO manager skills that I've heard directly from executives that they would like to see or regret that they didn't have in place in their PMO manager. And then likewise, I'll seek to get through this presentation. It's not overly deep. I hope you'll find it very enjoyable and something that will be very easy for you to go off and find further information. But again, it's not overly deep, and I hope that we'll have ample time at the end for some good feedback and questions and answers. PMO manager survival skills. Why this topic? Why are we even having a topic in this great platform that ITPMI has for us on this subject matter? And I'll tell you, when I suggested it, when asked, they were overwhelmingly supportive of developing this presentation, thinking that it would really complement the other PMO kinds of presentations that are available for us. So why this topic? Well, one reason is because if you look out there at PMO management, there's lots of tips and techniques for the PMO. What should the PMO do? What should the PMO not do? How does the PMO establish value, become strategic? But are there a similar number of tips for the PMO manager? And if you're like me, the few times that I've looked around and wanted to put something together, I really struggle to find good PMO manager tips, not aimed at the PMO as a business unit, but aimed at the person managing the PMO. Now, many of you have seen this cartoon. This is but three of the many, many, many amusing pictures of the tire swing development effort. The point of just showing a few of these pictures is to just call out the very real-life fact that many organizations go through a number of PMO initiatives before finding success. I would say on average it's about three. You have the initial start, maybe a correction with a new PMO manager, and then finally it arrives at the sweet spot after about 3 tries. But as you know from the cartoon, some organizations may use even more. And for those organizations that get it right the very first time, well, they deserve a pat on the back. But my point in showing this is that though the organizations may go through a number of initiatives to arrive at PMO success, the reality is that though the PMO survives, typically the PMO manager does not. Hence the rest in peace PMO manager. So that's really the whole point of addressing PMO manager survival skills in that, how can we maybe just take a moment out to think about, reflect upon, and then take action so that PMO managers indeed, find success personally and professionally. And that's just as important as the PMO finding success. So why PMO managers are at high risk? Well, one, if you take a look at some of the research that's out there, and as part of the 3-book series that I wrote on business-driven PMO setup, what we found is that there was a rate of PMO shutdown. Now, these numbers vary a little bit based upon certain types of PMOs, but generally speaking, after the first year, 25% of PMOs are shut down. After 2 years, about half of the PMOs that have been started are shut down. And after 4 years, 75% of PMOs are closed. So that's a very high rate of shutdown. So this rate of shutdown represents, for some organizations, PMO churn, And that's fine. PMO is tough to get right, and it's natural to start and then correct. But what this also represents, as we saw in the previous slide, is when those PMOs go through churn or recasting or starting up and shutting down, oftentimes the PMO manager doesn't get retained. Why do we have this track record? Well, many people believe, and I believe this as well, that in the project management industry, the domain of thought leadership, there's a tremendous cart before the horse tendency. What I mean by that is no sooner than the idea of a PMO is suggested within the organization than someone advocates some kind of a people process tools strategy for the PMO. You know, they quickly pick a PMO model, like a coaching model or support model or control tower, fighter squadron, weather station model, strategic PMO, value-add PMO. We've heard them all. And then rapidly they advance a people process tools strategy in support of that model, maybe add in a training program because no one's going to suggest training is bad to do. And what they've done is they put the cart before the horse. Before really establishing the purpose of the PMO, they've advanced the solution. And that's a real problem. That puts the PMO at risk, and though the PMO may correct, as I mentioned before, very often the PMO correction is not a correction that includes the PMO manager. It's usually a correction that is brought about with a new PMO manager being brought in. And then if you think about that cart before the horse tendency, it's also exasperated by the always present industry buzz and hype, where there's well-intended research organizations, well-intended consultants, maybe well-intended vendors with thought leadership advocating approaches, whether it's taking a PMO to the next level or the next generation PMO or value-add PMO, strategic PMO, or maybe it's all about bimodal IT, or maybe it's scaled agile framework. And all of these things are good in their own right to discuss, to share information, to consider for possible adoption. But where they go astray is when the initiative starts to become one of, how do we do this here, versus what do we need here? A key area that's significant risk for PMO managers is what I like to call the PMO manager skill conundrum. And this is in no way meant to be of disrespect to PMO managers, but let me explain this just a bit. If you're a line of business executive, say a general manager or divisional vice president, are that you have been provided all kinds of executive education on general management, on business plan development, on how to do negotiations, on situational leadership, servant leadership, all kinds of strategic and tactics, and otherwise skills that executives and leaders need to know and exhibit. And I can attest when I made first-line manager at IBM, I was sent off to a one-week management school before I was even allowed to talk to one of my employees that reported to me. When I became a second-line manager, I was sent off to a 2-week class at Wharton School of Business. And when I was a general manager, I was sent off to a 10-day class over 2.5 weeks in London, and on and on and on. And my point is line of business executives typically get provided a great deal of training in leadership and in management and in skill sets helpful for managing complex environments. And I would say, as a former line of business executive, that I didn't use all of that training I was provided, though all of that training was useful, and a lot of it I did use. Look at the PMO manager. I would submit to you that most PMO managers get a fraction of the executive and general management training that their counterparts get, or even higher-ups get. But the point I really want to bring about is, and I can speak to this firsthand because I've been a PMO manager and I've been an executive, I would share with you unequivocally that the executive education skill sets and training that executives